extraordinary men. They were a significant launch pad for everything that Next Generation became. Leonard came to work on our show with humor and enthusiasm and dignity, and we were all somewhat in awe of his presence on stage.
Really?
As we had been when DeForest Kelley appeared in our first series, and Jimmy I felt it a real distinction to have worked with Leonard and to get to know him a little. He's a very private man, and I didn't see as much of Leonard as I would like to have done. Mr. Shatner, on the other hand, he's a piece of work, isn't he? At some point today, I will find both of these gentlemen and give them a big hug and a kiss and an embrace, because I adore them both. But Bill, who I've got to know quite well and who I like immensely and admire and respect. I wonder if any of you know, I've told this a couple of times and it's a private story, but it's out there now in the public domain and it's worth telling again. You may or may not know that 5 or 6 years ago I had an emergency heart condition. While I was having my regular annual checkup, it was discovered that I had a serious heart condition. And I was given immediate emergency treatment at the Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, and it was totally successful. But they kept me in for several days. And in fact, my bill for valet Parking my car was more than for the procedure that I had. And SAG wouldn't pay for it. Just before I was released from the wonderful care of the doctors and staff at Cedars, I received a card, and when I opened it up, I saw at once that it was from Bill. And it said the following: Patrick, I understand you've had a heart problem, and that when they opened you up, your heart was missing. The reason is, I've been wearing it on my sleeve all these years. Mr. William Shatner, gentleman and humorist and horseman. Yeah, well, it was, what can I say? I mean, I only have to see either of these two gentlemen and it's a thrill. Thank you. And by the way, while I'm on my feet, let me just stress, have annual checkups, folks. And work out, because it was only through working out that I began to feel something isn't right. It wasn't through just living, it was because I was pushing myself that something showed up. And then I went for my checkup and bingo. So please take care of yourselves.
You talked about your spacesuit, that you still have one. I was very fortunate to have worked in wardrobe in 1987 with Bill Tice. And I remember going into work in the mornings, and I don't know if you recall this, but he had a sign that said, "Take off your clothes, I'll be with you in a moment." Do you remember that? There was a lot of humor made out of the fact that you did this all the time. It was called the Picard maneuver, I believe. And do you have any memories in relation to costuming, mishaps, things that you didn't like about the spacesuits? I know they were uncomfortable, the early ones.
We wore spandex costumes for the first 2 seasons. one-piece spandex costumes, which were made one size too small. You will confirm this, won't you?
Absolutely, absolutely.
The reason being that they would stretch over the contours of the body. Now, stay calm. Miss, stay calm. Stretch over the contours of the body. Shameless. You're all shameless. And so, if you can imagine, the effect on the body of these costumes was to make you want to do this. But you had to do this. And it was very bad for us. And I began to suffer all kinds of back and neck and shoulder problems. And before the second season was over, it was my doctor who contacted the production office and said, if you do not take this man out of these costumes, he's going to have a lasting physical condition that is going to cost you dear. And so there were discussions, and we went into the good old two-piece wool costumes that were very comfortable, and with various modifications over the years. They served us well. The uniform I have is not one of the original. I would imagine they exist somewhere, presumably in private collections, given that Paramount sold off a lot of the next generation set and costumes and props recently. But I do have a two-piece uniform, complete with the pips are all in place and the communicator badge. I wear it most evenings.
Do you still wear your gym jams?
Do I wear my what?
Your gym jams, as you call them?
Gym jams?
The cards sleepwear?
No, the gym jams I don't have. I wish I had held on to the gym jams. I wish somebody had held on to the gym jams. I can tell you there is nothing cuter than knowing that you have a house guest who happens to be a Next Generation fan and taking them up to my wardrobe, to my closet, and just pulling this thing out and saying, look. And they get a big kick out, because it was my, I can't remember when or where I wore it, because I had several uniforms, but it is an authentic captain's uniform. I mean, mine. Yeah, built ties. Yeah, I remember that notice. Take off your clothes, someone will be with you shortly. And then we went on to work with Robert, I'm going to say Jim Blackman, and I meant, help me out. I beg your pardon? Dorinda Wood and then Bob Blackman, yeah. And they did some delightful things for us in terms of costume. I hated that suede thing that I used to wear. You see photographs of it show up occasionally, yeah.
You look great in the 1940s Dixon Hill.
Oh. Yeah. That was fun. That was all the costume things we did were a lot of fun.
So what about X-Men? What about your role as Professor X? He has a question.
You put it out there. Go ahead.
Yeah. Is there a future for Professor X and Patrick Stewart? Are we going to see any more?
I am told that there is. I mean, those of you who saw Wolverine would have been aware that the good professor made a brief appearance in that. I hear that it stopped the show whenever people saw it. because, you know, a little bit of humility will do Hugh Jackman a lot of good. Just realizing he's not the only hunk on the planet. Hugh Jackman. You know, I'm sure you know, he is arguably the most delightful, the sweetest guy on earth. Just, you know, how they come to be so cute and sweet and to be Australian. It's there's hope for all of us. My Australian friends here in the audience, I didn't mean it. That was a joke. I will regret it for the rest of my life. I am told that there is a project in development, as we say in Hollywood, which has a good chance of including the professor. But some of you may know, I have just spent the last 7.5 months working as closely as it is possible for one actor to work with another, with my nemesis, Magneto, Sir Ian McKellen. We have just finished, we closed only 3 weeks ago, after 172 performances, 22 weeks of 8 shows a week. Don't do the maths, because we missed some days here and there. A production of Sam Beckett's Waiting for Godot. Because the two lead characters, which Sir Ian and I played, are, you know, they have a 50-year history and relationship, and I've known Ian almost that long, and so we decided very early on that we would share a dressing room, which is a little unusual for leading actors. You have your own room, you know, your own dresser, but we shared a dressing room for 6.5 months, and got to know one another pretty well. That's better than we had before, and both of us feel that it would be just grand if that old, combative, respectful, challenging relationship with Magneto and Xavier were on the screen once more. But I think Sir Ian has another turnaround as Gandalf before that happens.
Patrick, I'm afraid that we're almost out of time for this session. So in 4 or 5 minutes? Okay.
And you didn't have any more questions?
No, I didn't. That was a dramatic. That was a dramatic pause.
You become my therapist. I am familiar with that question. I am familiar with that therapeutic technique. It works, by the way. But Eric, Jean-Luc Picard was a fictional character. He didn't really exist. That is a cardboard cutout. And not even to please you, who I like and respect, will I address myself to a cardboard cutout.
Well,
actually, you know, one thing I would like to say, I wish I were that tall.
Well, unfortunately, someone just came up and informed me that this does have to be the end of our time together. So, ladies and gentlemen, a big DragonCon Atlanta